Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of practices here with Vineyard Covington. My name is Joe and I'm one of the leaders, and we have been going through abiding practices in this season as we continue to follow the ways of Jesus. Today we're going to talk about fasting, which is an ancient spiritual practice that reminds me that we are apprenticing to Jesus with our whole selves. This obviously includes our bodies, and fasting is a great way to step into that. I love this quote from Vineyard pastor Jay Pathak when he talks about fasting, and he says, quote, "It's not that you're so full of God that you don't need more of him. It's that you've been so full of other things that it feels as though you don't need God." Can you relate to that? And we are full of a bunch of other things that our culture pushes on us, that we're distracted by. So removing something so important like food can really sharpen our focus and help us abide in the vine. Fasting is about replacing physical sustenance with spiritual sustenance. It's designed to reveal our dependence, not just tweak our habits. And it's really powerful throughout Scripture. There are a ton of examples. I want to highlight a few really fast. 1 Samuel 7 and 2 Chronicles 20 remind us that when prayer and fasting are combined, whole armies can be defeated. 1 Kings 21 and Jonah 3 remind us that God's judgment can be turned back through prayer and fasting. And Jesus talked about fasting too during his time on earth. But one of my favorite examples is in Matthew chapter 4. You'll remember this. It's right after Jesus was baptized. And immediately it says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the enemy. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry." John Mark Comer, in his fantastic book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, talks about this story. And the way that he explained it has kind of changed my perspective on it a little bit, and on fasting. He talks about how we often look at this story and think that Jesus was in a place of weakness. But what if it was actually the opposite? Here's the quote from Comer. He says, "The wilderness isn't the place of weakness, it's the place of strength. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness because it was there and only there that Jesus was at the height of his spiritual powers. It was only after a month and a half of prayer and fasting in the quiet place that he had the capacity to take on the devil himself and walk away unscathed." You see, for Jesus, fasting strengthened him and gave him the ability to take the enemy on that he didn't have just with his own physical strength. And I want to say that I think it can do the same thing for you and me as we continue to battle the things of this world and the enemy in our lives. But first, I want to remind you, fasting without prayer is just a diet, and there's nothing wrong with a diet. But if you really want to practice this, if you want to step into what it can do, prayer has to be a big part of your fast. I found it really impactful as well to have a specific focus of prayer during my fasts. So this might be one issue that you're contending for. Maybe there's someone that you're praying for healing for. Maybe it's a job situation. Maybe you're just praying for your kids and fasting to contend for their futures. John Tyson says this about fasting. He says, "Fasting in the biblical sense is choosing not to partake of food because your spiritual hunger is so deep, your determination and intercession so intense, or your spiritual warfare so demanding that you have to temporarily set aside even fleshly needs to give yourself to prayer and meditation." This is a big deal. So this week we're going to fast together. And I just want to remind you, this can look a lot of different ways. You can just decide to set aside one meal during your day and spend it with Jesus, praying. Or you can take a 24-hour fast and decide that you want to have dinner one night and then take 24 hours and not break your fast until dinner the next day. I also want to call out that, there's a lot of people that just aren't able to fast from food in this season, and that doesn't eliminate you from this practice at all. There's a lot of other things that you can fast from, especially in this Lenten season that we're in the midst of. You can choose to fast from alcohol or from social media or maybe just from negativity. These are all good options and allow us to abide more in the ways of Jesus. Fasting is emptying ourselves of the things our flesh craves and replacing them with more of Jesus. It's addressing the dopamine reward mechanisms in our brains that crave physical satisfaction and breaking those connections to reorient ourselves towards a greater food, intimacy with Jesus. So practice this with us this week. For those of you that want to practice alongside some of us in Vineyard Covington, many of us fast on Thursdays, and I want to invite you into that. The more that are doing this together, the more powerful it can be. But however you choose to do this, just remember that this is another way to practice abiding in the vine. So have a great week, and thanks for watching.